On a morning when gentle spring sunlight bathed the Winnetka district in Chicago's suburbs, I was absorbed in my daily gardening routine. Tending to the roses and checking on new buds has become my cherished pastime since retiring from my 35-year career as a nurse. Good morning, Grandma Patricia. The cheerful voices of children heading to school ring out, and I remove my dirt-covered gloves to wave back. It's been 30 years since I started living alone in this upscale neighborhood. Now, I'm known affectionately as Grandma to all the neighborhood children. After finishing my gardening, I return to the living room where my eyes fall on a photograph displayed above the fireplace. My daughter Allison, her husband Christopher, and my adorable grandson Noah, a family portrait taken last Christmas. The three of them smile in front of their elegant Tudor-style mansion. Allison and Christopher met 7 years ago at a Chicago Memorial Hospital fundraising party. Allison had just started working as a pediatrician, while Christopher was the CEO of an up-and-coming real estate development company. They became known as the perfect couple in social circles, and a year later, they held a grand wedding. Even now, remembering the ceremony warms my heart. The two exchanged vows in a historic church in Central Park, witnessed by over 300 guests. Allison wore an antique tiara inherited from her husband's mother, looking radiant like a fairy tale princess. 2 years later, Noah was born. He's grown into a smart, caring boy who now attends the area's top preschool. Our weekly family brunches have become my precious joy. Every time Noah tells me Grandma's pancakes are the best in the world, my heart fills with happiness. But lately, I've been worried about Allison. Our phone conversations have become shorter, and she stopped showing up for weekend brunches, citing hospital work as an excuse. When I saw her last week, her usual brightness was gone, and she wore an expression that suggested she was troubled by something. My intuition, honed by years of training as a nurse to never miss subtle changes in patients, tells me something is wrong. But what could be happening to my daughter, who should be living a fulfilled life amid such wealth? One early morning, I was awakened by the sound of my phone ringing. The clock showed 5:15 a.m. Through my bedroom window, I could see the first hints of light breaking through the still dark sky. The moment I saw the hospital number displayed on the screen, the tension I'd known during my 35 years as a nurse coursed through my body. That number was still etched into my being. "Ms. Morgan, your daughter Allison has been brought in by ambulance." At those words, my heart felt like it stopped for a moment. The voice belonged to Carol, the head nurse in the emergency department. Though her tone was calm, there was a subtle tension mixed in. "What's her condition?" I struggled to keep my voice steady as I continued questioning. "She fell down the stairs and is unconscious." When the paramedics arrived, she was already unresponsive. "Her vitals are stable, but we're planning to do a CT scan immediately due to possible concussion. Her husband appears to be on a business trip to London, and we're trying to contact him urgently." As I hurriedly changed clothes, I organized the necessary information in my head. My years of nursing experience helped me maintain clear judgment even at times like this. I quickly put on a white cashmere sweater and navy pants, skipping my usual makeup routine that I never forget. "I'll be right there," I hang up and pack only the essentials in my bag. On my way to the entrance, I catch sight of our family photo on the wall. Now, my daughter's exhausted expression from when I last saw her last weekend seems oddly concerning. I rush to the garage and start my Lexus RX 350. The drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital usually takes 15 minutes. I grip the steering wheel with trembling hands as I drive through the dimly lit early morning streets. Every time I stop at a red light, images of my daughter's smile flash through my mind, her radiant expression on her wedding day, her tired but content smile after giving birth to Noah, and her recent downcast demeanor. "Please be okay," I whisper, the words echoing in the quiet car. Upon arriving at the hospital, Jennifer, a nurse I know, was waiting at the emergency department entrance. We've known each other for 20 years and shared many night shifts when I was still working. Everyone remembers me from my 35 years of service at this hospital. "Patricia, I'm glad you're here." Jennifer rushed over and gripped my hand tightly. The worried shadow on her face suggests the seriousness of the situation. Treatment Room 3. Dr. Williams is in charge. Walking down the long white corridor, the smell of disinfectant hits my nose. No matter how accustomed I am to this smell, when it's your own family member who's the patient, the hospital's distinct atmosphere feels strangely heavy. In the emergency treatment room, I found Allison surrounded by medical equipment. The steady beep of the heart monitor echoes in the quiet space, while 4 drops fall in a constant rhythm. The pulse oximeter shows 98% oxygen saturation, and her blood pressure is stable. Still, my mother's heart aches at the sight of my daughter's pale face. As I listened to Dr. Williams's explanation, I gazed at my daughter's face. Her usual vibrant expression was gone, replaced by an eerily peaceful look as if she were merely sleeping. There was a small scrape on her forehead, and bruising had started to appear on her right arm. Through the gaps in her hospital gown buttons, I could see faint bruises on her neck. My experience as a nurse, having seen countless fall accidents, was raising warning signals. Was this really just an accident? At that moment, the treatment room door quietly opened, and a small shadow appeared. "Noah!" I exclaimed involuntarily upon seeing my grandson. Kate, his babysitter, stood behind him with an apologetic expression. Dressed in her white uniform, Kate has been a trusted caregiver for Noah for the past 3 years. He insisted on coming. I was planning to bring him in the morning, but Noah wouldn't stop crying. Kate's voice was filled with deep concern. Noah slowly approached his mother's bed, looking at the unconscious Allison with anxious eyes. Tears glistened in those small eyes. Still in his light blue pajamas, he was carefully holding a brown teddy bear, the one Allison had given him for his 3rd birthday. "Grandma." The expression on Noah's face as he called me in a thin voice made me sense something significant. My heart started racing at the sight of my usually cheerful and energetic grandson appearing so frightened. "What is it, Noah?" Mama said, if anything happened, to look here. His trembling little finger pointed to Allison's abdomen. In that instant, my nursing instincts of 35 years sharply responded. Feeling the gazes of the medical staff around me, I slowly approached the bed. I gently lifted the sheet. Through the gaps in the hospital gown cut open by the paramedics, I could see bruises on her abdomen. The pattern clearly showed signs of someone having held her down. And the slightly swollen lower abdomen displayed the characteristic changes I'd seen thousands of times in the maternity ward. Maintaining my composure, I called over the attending physician. I struggled desperately to keep my voice from shaking. Could we get an ultrasound? From my experience, there might be early pregnancy. The doctor showed surprise for a moment but immediately instructed the nurse to prepare for an ultrasound. After applying gel to her abdomen and positioning the probe, the monitor revealed evidence of new life. 6 weeks pregnant. We can confirm the embryo. As the doctor's voice seemed to echo distantly, all the pieces started connecting in my mind. The fall down the stairs. The husband's absence. The bruises on her abdomen. And the recent changes in my daughter's behavior. All the pieces were forming a terrifying picture. Noah, did Mama say anything else? Still clutching his teddy bear tightly, Noah thought for a moment before answering in a small voice. She said Papa was scary. Last night, Mama was crying. The moment I heard those words, my spine froze. My experience as a nurse, having seen numerous domestic violence cases, told me the gravity of this situation. My eyes, trained to never miss signs of abuse, clearly saw all the evidence. I took out my phone and dialed emergency services without hesitation. After ending the call, I gently embraced Noah. Feeling his small body trembling slightly, I steeled my resolve. This time, I would properly protect them, my beloved daughter, grandson, and the unborn life yet to be seen. Within 30 minutes of the report, 2 detectives from the Chicago Police Department's Major Crimes Unit arrived at the hospital. Detective Jessica Martin, in her late 40s, was an experienced investigator who had specialized in domestic violence and abuse cases for over 20 years. Behind her gentle demeanor lay sharp observational skills that had solved numerous difficult cases. Her partner, Detective Mike Donovan, was a rising star in his early 30s known for his keen insight, having solved several major cases since his appointment. First, could you tell us more about your daughter's injuries? Detective Martin asked, reviewing the medical chart in her green binder. Her fingertips, holding the notepad, showed the undeniable strength developed through years of investigative work. I explained the situation precisely. While the CT scan showed no clear head trauma, there are multiple contusions throughout her body. Particularly, the bruise pattern on her abdomen clearly shows signs of being held down. Furthermore, ultrasound confirmed she's 6 weeks pregnant. So there are injuries that can't be explained by a fall down the stairs, Detective Donovan pointed out sharply. His blue eyes held a light that suggested he had already seen through to the heart of the case. Sitting in the plastic chairs lining the hospital corridor, I detailed my daughter's recent behavior, how her meals had become less frequent, how she'd started avoiding weekend family gatherings, and most notably, how that vibrant smile had gradually disappeared. I noticed the old bruise on her neck 2 weeks ago. She said she'd fallen, but... Detective Martin gently placed her hand on my shoulder as my words caught in my throat. At that moment, the ICU ward's automatic doors burst open with a loud noise, and a commotion echoed through the hall. Where is my wife? Let me see her immediately. Christopher had arrived. Usually impeccably dressed in an Armani suit, his hair was now disheveled, and his Hermes tie askew. However, there was something theatrical about his distressed appearance. The collar of his white shirt looked as if it had been freshly ironed. I felt Detective Martin tense slightly beside me. "Mr. Brown, we'd like to ask you about your wife's condition," Detective Martin spoke quietly, and Christopher's expression seemed to freeze for a moment. For just an instant, raw emotion leaked through his perfectly constructed facade. "Yes, of course. But could I see my wife first? I've just returned from London." His voice carried a calculated resonance. The sound of his expensive leather shoes striking the floor was different from his usual confident stride, containing a hint of hesitation. "I'm sorry, but your wife is currently undergoing tests. In the meantime, could you tell us about your stay in London?" At Detective Donovan's words, thin beads of sweat appeared on Christopher's forehead. His right eye twitched slightly beneath his perfectly groomed eyebrows. "Yes, I had business meetings, important negotiations with major developers." "Could you provide details of your activities between 11 p.m. last night and 5 a.m. this morning?" "Well, I had a drink with clients at the hotel bar, and after that." As he stumbled over his words, the veteran detective's eyes gleamed. Christopher's left hand could be seen unconsciously adjusting his tie. While the interrogation continued, I decided to speak with the hospital staff. Having worked at this hospital for 35 years, I had contacts in every department. And they were all eager to help. First, Sarah, who works at the cardiology department reception, provided crucial testimony. She's been a friend for 20 years, known for her observant eye that never misses anything happening in the hospital. Lately, I've noticed Dr. Allison and Dr. David together often. Lunch at the cafeteria, brief conversations in the rooftop garden. They're both wonderful doctors, but they've seemed downcast. Especially last week, Dr. Allison was acting strangely. Strange how? When we passed in the hallway, she'd quickly hide her phone screen and look around as if checking if anyone was watching. Martha, the head nurse in pediatrics, provided more specific information. She was my junior from when I was still working and had observed Allison's behavior up close. Last Thursday, I saw Dr. Allison crying on the phone. She kept saying, "Let's end this," and "We can't continue this relationship." But there was strong reluctance in her voice. Martha continued her testimony carefully, choosing her words. That evening, Christopher suddenly appeared at the hospital. A place he never usually comes to. And the decisive testimony came from Tom, a young emergency department doctor. He had been under Allison's guidance since his residency and looked up to her like a sister. Actually, Dr. David was staying late last night too. He usually leaves at 9 p.m., but he was here until after 11. And I witnessed what seemed like an argument between him and Dr. Allison in the hallway. Specifically, I heard Dr. David saying, "You should tell him," and Dr. Allison's urgent response of, "If I do that." As I gathered information, the dots were connecting in my mind. The changes in my daughter's behavior, the unnatural injuries, and this accident. Everything was pointing in one direction. When this information was shared with the police, the investigation quickly turned toward Dr. David Carter. He agreed to voluntary questioning 2 hours later. In the interrogation room set up in a hospital conference room. Surrounded by ivory walls, David, with an exhausted expression, began to tell everything. "Allison and I have been involved for 6 months. She was suffering from her husband's controlling behavior. They might have looked like the perfect couple from the outside. But behind that, his voice trembled and sometimes broke, but spoke undeniable truth. His navy scrubs were wrinkled, and his hair unkempt. It started with casual conversations. As doctors working in the same hospital, we grew close while discussing patients. She began confiding in me about her vulnerabilities that she never showed her husband. He sighed deeply and continued. Last week, we found out Allison was pregnant. And the child might be mine. She was confused, wondering if she should tell Christopher everything. The air in the room seemed to freeze for a moment. Detective Martin prompted him for more details. Did Mr. Christopher suspect anything? At the quiet question, David looked up. His eyes showed deep regret. Starting last month, I began receiving threatening emails from Christopher. Stay away from my wife, I'll ruin everything, your career as a doctor and your life are over. And last night, David took out his phone with trembling hands and showed the last received message. Ominous words floated on the screen, it's all over. You'll never see her again. The timestamp showed 3:27 a.m., just before Allison was found. Why didn't you tell us sooner? The words escaped my lips involuntarily. As a healthcare worker who had seen so many domestic violence cases, yet couldn't notice it with my own daughter, that frustration welled up in my chest. David answered with deep regret, I wanted to protect Allison. Her career as a doctor, her relationship with Noah. I wanted to protect everything. But in the end, I brought about the worst outcome. My cowardice led her to this situation. His voice caught, and he covered his face with both hands. David continued his testimony about the events of that fateful night. That night, I received an urgent message from Allison. It said, Christopher knows everything. Help. I tried calling immediately, but her phone was already turned off. The full picture of the incident emerged through security camera footage and phone records. After returning home, Christopher had disabled the home security cameras. Late at night, he attacked Allison while she was looking at her phone in the bedroom. Near the stairs, which was a blind spot for security cameras, Christopher forcefully restrained Allison and confronted her about the pregnancy. The investigator organized the timeline. Then, after a struggle, it appears he deliberately pushed her down the stairs. While the surveillance camera footage cuts off suddenly at 11:47 p.m., witness statements from neighbors confirm that they heard a noise and a woman scream shortly after. During the approximately 30 minutes between the incident and the ambulance's arrival, Allison, in her semi-conscious state, had desperately crawled to Noah's room to give her son one final message. This led to the action of pointing to her abdomen, saying, "Look here." The emergency call came from an elderly couple next door who found the late-night noises suspicious. A patrol officer was the first to arrive at the scene, discovering Allison unconscious on the floor. They immediately requested an ambulance, and she was transported to the hospital. Based on this testimony, the police investigation progressed rapidly. Christopher's alibi began to crumble piece by piece. His claimed return time from London also proved inconsistent. Security camera footage from Heathrow Airport showed he wasn't there at the time he claimed. Furthermore, Chicago city surveillance cameras confirmed his presence near their home at the time of the incident. His perfect alibi fell apart in the face of technology. As the investigation proceeded, even more terrifying facts came to light. Surveillance software was discovered on Allison's smartphone. He had been monitoring all her actions, messages, and location information. Email records revealed traces of persistent surveillance and psychological abuse spanning several months. The reality of his terrifying control, hidden behind the facade of a perfect husband, gradually came to light. The elegant life in the upscale neighborhood, the glamorous behavior in social circles, it was all just an illusion. Looking at the afternoon sunlight streaming through the hospital room window, I hold my daughter's hand tightly. Though she hasn't regained consciousness yet, her expression has become peaceful. Digital forensics experts completed their analysis of Christopher's smartphone and computer on the early morning of the third day after the incident. The results revealed the existence of a meticulous plan that far exceeded our imagination. In the Chicago Police Department headquarters conference room, the investigation team was holding a briefing. On the huge screen, evidence supporting Christopher's crimes was displayed one after another. First, regarding the surveillance app installed on the victim's smartphone, Sarah Chin, the digital forensics expert, began her explanation. Her tablet displayed complex data flows. This app was disguised as a battery management tool. However, it was actually recording all of Allison's activities. Messages, emails, location information, and even call records. The screen displayed detailed logs from the past 6 months. Everything was recorded, from Allison's movements at the hospital, her contact with David, to the moment she realized her possible pregnancy. What's particularly noteworthy is how this data was stored. Sarah switched screens. The suspect used an encryption system applying blockchain technology, which he had adapted from his real estate development work. This is a highly sophisticated method, anticipating the need to conceal evidence. Detective Martin furrowed her brow and asked, "So the alibi fabrication shows the same level of meticulousness?" "Yes. All evidence related to the London business trip was perfectly fabricated." James Morrison from the Cybercrime Unit took over the explanation. Flight bookings, hotel check-in records, even restaurant payment histories. However, these were all elaborate forgeries. In reality, video analysis shows he returned from London on the evening flight the day before the incident. The screen showed Christopher captured on O'Hare International Airport security cameras. The timestamp was 11:15 p.m. the day before the incident. The perfectly calculated timing revealed the thoroughness of his plan. Moreover, there was tampering with the home security system. Morrison presented new materials. According to the records, footage from the time of the incident is missing due to a system error. However, we succeeded in recovering fragments of the deleted footage from the backup server. It showed Christopher arguing with Allison at the top of the stairs. The timestamp was just 10 minutes before the incident occurred. His face showed no trace of his usual gentlemanly mask. "Do we have the warrant?" Detective Donovan's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Yes. The prosecution is fully cooperative." Detective Martin nodded quietly. "With this much evidence, denial won't work." The arrest team headed to Christopher's company that afternoon. His office on the top floor of the high-rise building commanded Chicago's finest view. However, that view was about to become the stage for his downfall. Christopher Brown, "You're under arrest for attempted murder," Detective Martin's voice echoed through the luxurious office. "This is ridiculous. I have the best lawyers. This whole thing." Christopher's words were cut off by the cold touch of handcuffs. His figure, clothed in an expensive Armani suit, was led out of the office as employees looked on. The scene was immediately reported by the media. Real estate tycoon arrested on domestic violence charges, madness lurking behind perfect husband's mask, shocking incident rocks Chicago's elite family. The social scandal spread across the nation in an instant. The glamorous public face of high society and the reality of violence lurking behind it were sensationally reported. But for me, it wasn't just news. It was all a record of the nightmare that had tried to take away my precious daughter's life. And on the morning of the 7th day after the incident, Allison regained consciousness. In the morning sunlight streaming into the hospital room, I was holding my daughter's hand. Suddenly, her fingertips moved slightly. "Allison," I called out while pressing the nurse call button. Her eyes opened slowly, still clouded but definitely showing signs of consciousness. "Mom," Allison called out in a hoarse voice. "Oh, thank goodness." Tears of joy and relief streamed down my cheeks. Medical staff hurriedly entered the room, but their sound seemed distant. However, the joy was short-lived. Allison suddenly placed her hand on her abdomen. "The baby." After careful examination by the medical team, it was discovered that she had lost the fetus due to the violent impact of the assault. The doctor quietly delivered the news. "I'm sorry, we couldn't detect a fetal heartbeat." The color drained from Allison's face. Her hand naturally moved to her abdomen. "My baby." As she whispered in a trembling voice, large tears rolled down her cheeks. A child with Christopher, who would have been Noah's brother or sister, the reality of losing this small life at the hands of her own husband plunged Allison into deep grief. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you," I said, gently embracing my daughter and rubbing her back. "It's not your fault. From now on, I'll protect you and Noah properly." Outside the window, gentle spring sunlight was shining on the hospital garden. Deep sadness for the lost life and gratitude for my daughter's survival filled my heart. It was as if a long, dark night had ended and a new morning had arrived. At that moment, the hospital room door quietly opened, and a small shadow appeared. "Mama!" Noah's voice rang out, and a smile appeared on Allison's face for the first time in a long while. "Noah!" With trembling hands, Allison embraced her son. Watching this scene, I made a firm vow. In the new life beginning now, I would never let them be hurt again. Yes, to protect my beloved family. A year has passed since then. Today again, spring sunlight bathes my garden. Newly planted rose buds are beginning to show their gentle colors. Allison and Noah moved into the house next door to mine. Though it's a small house incomparable to their previous mansion, true happiness dwells here. In the mornings, Noah's energetic voice echoes through the garden. "Grandma, look." Today too, my grandson came to show me an essay he wrote at school. Titled "My Brave Mom," the essay is filled with deep love for Allison. Christopher's trial sent shockwaves through society. The reality of domestic violence and the structure of sophisticated control using social status came to light, and many media outlets covered the case. As a result, he received a 15-year prison sentence for attempted murder. Prompted by this incident, I began volunteer work supporting domestic violence victims. Using my 35 years of nursing experience, I'm involved in providing emotional care for victims. The courage of the many people I meet there becomes our support. David decided to move to a hospital in Seattle. Before leaving, he left words of deep apology to Allison. They were words that acknowledged his mistakes while also blessing her new life. Allison now shines more than ever as a pediatrician. She says that because she has experienced being wounded herself, she can more deeply empathize with patients' pain. Recently, she was chosen as a leader of young doctors in recognition of her achievements at the hospital. Noah is growing up bright and healthy. Lately, he's been saying, "I want to be a doctor too," and seriously listens to my heartbeat with Allison's stethoscope. Surely his Father in heaven must be pleased with this sight. Last Sunday, after Mass at church, Allison made a small confession to me. She's gradually becoming close to a lawyer she met in the same support group. I felt I saw a hint of new spring in her eyes. There will surely be various difficulties ahead. But we are no longer alone. Through overcoming this ordeal, our family has become stronger, bound by deeper ties. The rose buds in the garden have begun to open gently, as if announcing the beginning of a new season.